Let me introduce our first speaker, Pavel Žák. I see many familiar faces here, so I don't need to introduce Pavel very much, but a few years ago he developed a mobile app that became the Kiwi.com app as you know it now. As a head of mobile development, he introduced some really cool features that are really unique, and now he's focusing on some personal projects which he will talk about right now. So put your hands together for Pavel. Okay, may I ask somebody from Impact Hub to help us? It seems to switch to the Elvish language. Okay, so fingers crossed.
I won't touch it.
Another applause for Pavel. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will try not to touch this laptop, so we have at least some slide. Hello, thank you for the introduction. I'm Pavel Žák, and I will have a short talk today about SwiftUI and my endeavors with SwiftUI up to this moment. But first, let me take you a bit to the past and tell you how I actually got to this point. 8 years ago, I was quite failing PhD student. I was doing a lot of stuff with computer vision and user interfaces, and at that time I bought myself my first iPhone. And I didn't know that back then, but it actually changed the course of my career. Because with two of my friends, I started a mobile development company called Streamlabs. And we started to develop mobile apps for Android, iOS, and also some Windows Phone apps at the time. We did different marketing stuff, traveler assistants, games. We even wrote our own 3D engine. So it was fun times. And if I wasn't spending enough time in my office, I was also part of the metal band. And so I spent summer fests on the stages. And coincidentally, also our drum player was quite addicted to Android development. And one summer we closed the bet. Which one of us will write a better game till the end of summer? I found it on some tweet, and you can see that it has been dated on July 22nd, 2013. And then that summer, I had this idea of really simple logic game, where you have some tiles and you can rearrange them using various buttons that can change the tiles accordingly. At the time, I wrote some prototype, and as it is with the side projects, they are never finished, right? And this happened also. And several years passed, and this year we have attended WWDC with my colleagues here at kiwi.com. And I don't know how many iOS developers are here. Can you raise your hands? Definitely all of you are familiar with all the news things that have been introduced this year on WWDC. And one of them was SwiftUI. SwiftUI, for those who don't know, is a completely new decorative way how to build user interfaces and behavior within your apps. And my colleague did, during the WWDC week, some demo, and he wrote a 15 puzzle and was able to run it on all Apple devices like Apple Watch, tvOS, iPhone. And I remembered my own prototype and said, wow, this would be quite nice to actually rewrite this game in SwiftUI, it would be super simple, and I would have everything done like in 3 hours. It would be cool. So, coincidentally, I left my position here at kiwi.com, and I said to myself, what to do with my free time? Let's deep dive into SwiftUI, and what's the better motivation to master some technology than actually write some product, right? So I decided that I will write this game in SwiftUI, which may sound weird, but maybe you will see it's not as madness as it may seem in the beginning. So in this talk, I will describe some of the features of SwiftUI, why do I think it's good and why do I think it's future of the iOS development. I will also share my experiences during last couple of months, because as you may know, with new stuff, it's sometimes a bit tricky path to be taken part of. So just for you, for some brief introduction, I have mimicked here, let's say, one screen of the Promote Conference web page, and so you can see some code of how actually some app written in SwiftUI looks like. So it's a declarative way, so you declare how your UI looks like and how it behaves, and you simply build up the UI by composition of basic views and setting some attributes to them using view modifiers. So for example here, let's take a look on this register button. It can be constructed like this. You have a text view, which is really simple and renders a simple text, and then you assign several view modifiers that sets foreground color, font, some padding, background, clip shape, whatever you need. And if you need to create a button of that, you simply wrap it in the button view and you're done. So by the simple composition from build up from the basic views, you can create much more structured and much more robust user interfaces. If we need to break it up into several ways, let's start with the view modifiers. This is actually the first that you will encounter, and view modifiers are the way how you change appearance or behavior of your view. You can change layout, you can change some maskings or layout attributes, you can set background, overlay, and everything stacked into different Z layers. You can change blend modes, if you are familiar with the blend modes, how they work in Photoshop. This is the same here. Or you can change or set up some animations or transitions. Everything is quite easy, and what is the main concept here is that everything is a view, and when you set up a view modifier to a view, the result is also a view. So you can see here on the example, you can even have a color, and in SwiftUI, even a color is being perceived as a view. So you can set a color, and then set it a clip shape, and suddenly you can have a view with some shape, for example. The animations in SwiftUI is actually the thing that brought me to SwiftUI. Animation system works flawlessly, and it's state-based. So whenever you change any state of your view, of your interface, or within your model, it can be animated, and the change can be seen. So in my game, that is a simple tile game, you change the tile positions. The tile positions are represented in your model, and whenever you change the position, it can be animated. You are setting animation with this animation view modifier, and just set whatever animation and whatever timing curve you need there. So for example here, no more code related to animation is being implemented in this to get this that sort of result. And what is super cool about that is that actually the animations are fully interruptible. So you don't need to actually take care in what state the animation system is. Whenever you change your property that is being animated, the system knows how to move or shift or change the shape of whatever to the new state, so it relates to your model. For example, take here in the slow motion. When you are clicking really fast on the buttons, the animation system starts always to animate the tiles to new positions regardless of their current animation state. So even though it may seem chaotic, you don't have, actually it doesn't happen that you will get some messed up state in your animation or in your view. If this may seem not enough for you, there is a much stronger tool to create animations and transitions, and that is called geometry effect. Geometry effect is basically a custom view modifier that can be used to animate basically anything that it's not currently animatable, and also to introduce such things like keyframe animations. So when you, for example, need to have the animation that starts and ends in the same state, that would be unable to be animated by state change, you can use geometry effect for that. So you can introduce some separate state that can be animated, and basically you have full power to do anything related to the view, appearance, or positions, or whatsoever during this geometry effect. Similar to that is animatable view, and at this example, please check this orange dot. This orange dot changes the line according to the selected menu item, and the standard animation would be just shifting an y-axis. If you need this jumpy effect to happen there, it's actually during the animation alters the position. Geometry effect is the best tool that can be used for that. If you think that this is too simple, it's not. It may be combined you can combine various geometry effects and also standard animation approaches. And you can create, for example, animation like this. That's just composition of two geometry effects that do the rotation and following of along some path. View cannot be built without actually handling any data. To assist SwiftUI with the data handling, Apple provided us with the combined framework. It's again a declarative way of actually handling some values over time. It provides us with some subscribers and publishers and consumers of some value changes. And within the SwiftUI, everything is nicely wrapped using property wrappers. So no need to write some complicated boilerplate code. You simply wrap some of your values within, some of your attributes within your UI or model with these property wrappers. Let's go through it quickly. For the inner variables that some views has, you can have a state that is used for, I don't know, some appearance changes that don't need to be reflected back to your model. If you need to bind any value from your model to your view, binding is the best way to do it. And if you need to bind whole class or much more complicated object, you can wrap them as an observable object, and any attribute can be wrapped as a published property wrapper. So it can be here seen. So in my model, every tile is observable object, and its coordinate is wrapped as a published. So whenever coordinate changes, it automatically alters in the view, and as you can see, when coordinate changes, if you allow it, it can be animated and just switched to the new state. Providing observable objects or variables to views can lead to quite cascading style of passing some model through the hierarchy of your view. You already seen that. SwiftUI brings another concept to that, and those are environment objects. Environment objects are special type of objects that reside somewhere in the memory and are available for all the subviews of some view. So you don't need to actually pass anything through the hierarchy. You provide some module to the top level view, and any subview is able to communicate with this environment object. Basically, it leads to some sort of some sort of dependency injection that actually you don't need to specify what the view does depend on. Of course, there is more, and probably there is not enough time to actually introduce here a whole pack of SwiftUI. I would mention here only some of the things that why I think it's actually worth checking out. It is mainly native cross-device support. Anything you can use there is mixable with the standard UI kit in both ways. So you can use your UI kit views that you have from different projects within SwiftUI code base, and also you can mix your SwiftUI code base with the older UI kit projects. So it's quite easy to extend your current application with new SwiftUI code. There are also SF symbols that are actually icons that behave like text, which is super useful, for example, when you are providing accessible applications. These icons are processed correctly when they are handled using accessibility features like text processing or speech processing, sorry, and also they behave like text where users set presets, for example, larger text within its device. Also, the icons are larger, so everything is better readable. In SwiftUI, it is much easier to create reusable styling, and also in Xcode, you can live preview all the changes that you are doing during the coding. So especially for the onboarding, it's pretty easy to get familiar with actually what view modifier are doing. As I said, I started with SwiftUI somewhere during summer. Those were times when SwiftUI and iOS 13 were in beta mode, and actually jumping into that in that time was how to do it in the hard way. Because in that time everything was immature, everything was crashing a lot. You need to check what versions of iOS do you have installed on your device, what version of Catalina do you have on your macOS, what version of Xcode do you have installed, because there were huge incompatibilities there, especially pre-beta 5. Apart of some tutorials from Apple, there is basically no documentation, and reinstalling all these versions again and again, that every Xcode version has like 7 or 8 gigabytes of data. It was really interesting at that time. One of the immature things that I have encountered was that Xcode was unable to actually mark correctly where is the issue in your code. So here are 2 examples where I intentionally did something wrong. I put some string into the opacity view modifier, and Xcode, the first example says that there is some binary operator that cannot be applied, and in the second time, the compiler is unable to type check this expression in reasonable time, which is one of the craziest actually error codes I have ever encountered. Good news, in the new version of Swift 5.2, which I'm not aware if it's already out, this is already covered, but I have spent like several months with these issues, and when you write several lines of code and then you don't know where the issue is and you get these reasons, it's actually funny. SwiftUI offers only some basic views, and if you need anything else, you basically need to implement everything on your own. One of the examples is paging scroll view. on standard UIKit pages, scroll view is available, and it's one attribute to actually change scroll view behavior. On SwiftUI, I had to implement it on my own, just to get this quite familiar feel, look and feel. Great thing about SwiftUI is that actually the implementation has like, I don't know, 70, 80 lines of code, but it took me several days to actually figure out how to build those, especially in the beginning, because this was my first encounter with SwiftUI. Similar situation with custom layers. You have action sheets, you have quite default modal view and alert view, and that's it. And if you need some custom overlays, that does nothing, like just only slides from top and blurs its background, again, you need to implement it on your own. And yet another story, you have quite a lot of powerful tools how to change shapes and colors. But when I was doing some experiments with the hue rotation that changes the color according to the hue variants, I discovered that the colors produced are somehow different than I would expect. I'm a Photoshop user, and I was trying to actually, I was preparing some of the animations in Photoshop and then re-implemented them in SwiftUI, and I got completely different colors, and I didn't know why. And it is simply the hue rotation modifier that does that, doesn't preserve the value, lightness value of the colors. So again, if you need this sort of change that I was like relying on, I had to re-implement this interpolation on my own. So the question might be, are we there yet? Is it good actually to use SwiftUI for some production application? In my case, I was done. I released my game a month ago, and up to this moment it works nice, without any crashes. It works on iPhone, it works on macOS, even though it's not published yet. It works on watchOS, even though it's super stretched there, so it's not playable. I would say it may be a tool for some production, even though this example isn't just what you are probably building, right? For the games, it may be wrong tool on the wrong job, but for the others, I have put here some sort of summary how I actually think about SwiftUI and if it's actually ready for production environment. What I like is that when you actually get to master it, which was super difficult during summer, but nowadays as the community of the SwiftUI adopter is growing pretty fast, and there are numerous waves of different tutorials and courses on Udemy and whatever, the development speed is much higher for me than writing apps in the UIKit. Also, I have noticed that I naturally write the apps better, and I have much better architecture. I also need to admit that, for example, this game is actually my first app that is covered with UI tests and unit tests. And that's not just that I wanted to try it, but it was easy. It was easy for me and much easier than before, because the model is much better separated from your view. SwiftUI is actually a MVVM paradigm, but you can also change it to some Redux-like states. And so no more massive view controllers. It's quite easy to be debugged, and also it's quite easy to be read. I have a feeling that, for example, compared to what I was used to in old UIKit ways, even though if we had some storyboard interfaces, when I look at the code at SwiftUI, I simply see how it will be looking when it will be on your device, and how it will behave when changing, for example, from iPhone to the iPad or to macOS. So even though there is a live view available, so you can see all your changes, I somehow stopped using it at all because I know what I'm writing, and in 99% it looks like how I intended to be looking like. And of course, the cross-device support on all Apple devices is quite interesting for all the developers, because you don't need to actually distinguish between several devices like iPhone, iPad, or macOS. What I don't like and what I think are the main drawbacks at the moment. One of the main issues that I'm facing every day is actually mixing gestures. The gestures are not executed well at all in SwiftUI, and especially when you are, for example, mixing standard scroll view that is available in SwiftUI with your custom views that has some gesture recognizers set on. I usually end up with actually writing my custom view and using my custom implementation of scroll views, where I'm much more powerful to actually make these gesture recognizers work one aside another. Also, there are some issues with keyboard. So there is no standard way, for example, to dismiss a keyboard in SwiftUI, and you need to use like standard. You need to access UI application in the standard, and I would say old-fashioned way. It's possible, but it's unexpected, and I think that those are things that will be changing in the future versions of SwiftUI. The necessity of UI kit is both bad and good. As I already said, it's easy to mix with your code that you already have, but sometimes you are required to actually step aside and implement something in UI kit, which is especially an issue, for example, when you are writing the cross-platform application. I think also that there may be quite drastic changes in the future years. If you remember how, for example, Swift changed from version 1, 2, and 3 later, I think that we can expect something similar in SwiftUI. There are some obvious bits that need to be solved, and maybe it will be reflected in the new versions of SwiftUI. It already happened during the beta, during the year when, for example, how observable objects have behaved completely changed, and there were some changes also in how the view modifiers have been set up. So this is again there may happen that, for example, after next year WWDC, we will need to implement some part of our SwiftUI applications. And surprisingly, performance is also an issue here, especially I was facing in my game. I had there some fancy animations with custom interpolators, and it actually consumed too much CPU. And I didn't know that for a long time because I'm using cover on my iPhone. But when I removed the cover, the iPhone was basically super hot, and so I get to in the end I had to remove those animations. And either I messed up and I didn't understand how to do it, or there are some serious issues. SwiftUI is stated that it supports metal hardware acceleration, but even though I've tried to set up the proper draw groups and enable the metal rendering for my animations, I still got like super high CPU consumptions and energy consumptions. So for the like ordinary apps, it definitely is not an issue, but for some animations, like for applications where there are much heavier animations, it may be an issue, especially when you are using custom interpolators, as I saw earlier. So if you are still interested to start with SwiftUI, here are 4 references that I recommend. I have personal experience with them, so I can recommend them. Of course, WWDC videos and tutorials. Then there is a visual reference by Mark Moikens, which has all the basic views and all the basic new modifiers documented. So I say usually this is the missing documentation. And if you are into much deeper understanding of how it actually works and how it relates to the standard UI gateway, Daniel Steinberg wrote a book, SwiftUI Kickstart, which half of the book is actually devoted to understanding the concepts and the background and why we need this thing and why a combine is working like that and not like that. So it's actually quite worth reading. And last two online references are SwiftUI Web and Najib blogs. Those are guys who are doing a bit more than everyone else. Everyone else is doing some basic stuff, but these two are digging really deeper and are actually trying to figure out how SwiftUI works under the cover and how can it be used for much better architecture, much better animations. So I really recommend to check these things out. And I believe I'm done here, so feel free to ask me any questions. No questions.
Okay, thank you, Pavel. There are actually some questions on last one go, but we have switched off. But still feel free to ask personally. For the courageous ones, I have some sweets, and the uncourageous ones can ask on the Slido, which I will switch on in a minute. Yeah, we have a question.
Yeah, it's sort of,
Wait a minute.
you have one slide, are we there yet? And then you covered quite a lot of criticism, if we are there or not, on your slides. Do you think that Apple just released that as an experiment to see how the developer community is going to react to that, and whether it was actually just a response to the same that is happening with React Native and Jetpack and Flutter, because that's pretty much the same concept, just different language. Do you think that this is just Apple's response to it, or is it something that Apple is really seriously trying to push forward?
Yeah, I think that he's really trying to push it forward. I've had so many different conversations related to that, and I got to the conclusion that they were working on it for quite some time, and maybe it was a bit rushed to actually release it this year. But from my point of view, after some time, I realized that it is actually a good step. For example, on WWDC, one of the best ways is to spend the time at the labs with the Apple engineers and ask them questions. And when you have this technology to be actually demonstrated there, presented there, we could ask only the basic questions. How can I create a button? How can I move it? And such things, you know. And I think that during this year, actually, we can perceive it as a preparation year, because everyone sooner or later will actually be facing to be onboarded in some way to the SwiftUI. And next year, they will finally be able to provide us all the answers and maybe also fix all these issues, because I heard that they didn't want it to release it this year, and it was originally planned for the next year. Maybe it was rushed because of the Flutter, or I don't know. But actually it's a good thing, because they have a lot of feedback, lots of radar are being filled every day. So actually, thanks to this, next year I think SwiftUI will be 100% ready for your project.
So that means, you also mentioned what kind of project you can imagine writing in SwiftUI. Let's say I want to build an application that, I don't know, has tens of millions of users monthly. Is SwiftUI tool to use it for that?
The question is, are you able to support only iOS users of iOS 13 and plus? Because that's usually what is blocking most of the developers. Because if you are unable to even drop or actually think that I don't need iOS 12 users, then I think it's, at the moment, it's quite easy. I'm currently finishing my second app, and the development was actually much smoother because I knew all the pitfalls. And I've seen so many successful applications on App Store already, or talked with the people on various conferences already. So I wouldn't be so afraid, but yeah, definitely. I personally didn't encounter anything. As I said, there are some issues with keyboard. There might be other issues, for example, with notifications. I don't know. I haven't uncovered every part of the SwiftUI, but from what I see, I'm not afraid to use it in applications of any size.
Okay, so we have some Slido questions. How do you handle localization in SwiftUI?
It's much easier than before, but the concept is the same. So you still have your playlists, for example, with the strings, and as you saw, for example, this text view, if you have in the text view some string that is part in your strings file, it's being localized. If not, you wrap it as localized key something. It's really easy, and basically the concept is the same. So you still depend on the localization files in the same manner. It's actually being handled by Xcode. So in the same manner as you are localizing any resources in Xcode for standard UIKit application, it works the same for SwiftUI application.
Okay, another question. I still haven't tried Catalina neither, by the way, or anything related. How does the UI preview work? Is it stable enough for real development?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to install Catalina. I have it installed since August, and I haven't encountered any issue. Maybe in the beginning there were some issues with my Bacon drivers. The second part was about the previews. It is true that the previews are not stable enough. Like it happens that, for example, when you have super complicated view that depends on, for example, multiple environment objects, that the Xcode simply refuses to show you the live preview. So it happens. But as I said, in my case, these live previews were super cool in the beginning when I was learning, when I didn't know how actually this view modifier will alter the view. So I experimented, I changed some parameters, and I observed in real time how they are changing in the views. But now I don't write previews at all. I don't use it because I have trust in it, and since I know what every line of code does, I don't need the previews. So I wouldn't say that you need to have working previews for production development.
I have a question.
Yes?
In your opinion, how many years will pass before how many years will pass before the SwiftUI will replace the storyboards?
That is a cool question. I have absolutely no idea. I don't know how they deal with it at Apple. For example, in our old team at Kiwi, we ditched storyboards 5 years ago, so I'm not even thinking about them. But for example, if you know Krzysztof Zabłocki, he's quite a star from, he wrote Sorcery and several other quite popular tools, and he mastered storyboards in those ways that he is able to do, like, I would call it trickery, unimaginable things. He saw me some examples how he created tools for his designers, so he don't need to program something, and he just created in storyboard some drag and drop stuff, and his designers were able to actually create a game for children. So I don't want to say the storyboards are evil, but we ditched them quite a long time ago. So no clue at all. Any other question?
Probably not.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay, so thank you, thanks for being here.